Welcome to Spooky Stories. Get ready for hair-raising narratives and paranormal encounters. Subscribe now for your daily dose of the unknown. Let's begin.
I got up last night to grab some water. Something was perched on the balcony. The fridge could not hold the size of the pizza box. When I woke up, I had this harmless little notion while I drank the remainder of the water from the nightstand. Although the water was excellent, it wasn't enough. When I chose to get up for more after finishing the water, I couldn't help but think about the annoying pizza box that was still on the stove. I returned to the bedroom after getting more water. I hazily remembered them switching during the night as the son slept on the wife's side of the bed. He believed he saw a monster, therefore he decided to stand with her. To avoid my snoring, she took his room. More innocuous ideas. I strolled by the assortment of water glasses resting on the nightstand and set the refill for tonight. There was the pizza box on the stove. Like a robber in the night, I unlocked it stealthily, snatched up a chunk, sausage, a little bit more water, a little bit more of that, and then back to bed. Upon taking the first mouthful, the toppings all fall off. A naked, sauce-drenched, less than appetizing crust glinting in the gentle glow of the range hood on the stove. Paper towel. Panic. Attempting to save it, I put the crust on the counter, use the paper towel to wipe my lips, and then I walk away. There on the balcony, I spotted it. Watching that, I froze. The paper towel still in the middle of spreading across my mustache, it caught sight of me. It was observing in return. With the blinds slightly ajar to allow for outside views, we had kept them open. Although the balconies had been remodeled, there were still sufficient boards to support an object 7 feet tall outside the glass. 8? Was that right? I couldn't remember if I had looked at the clock as I watched it. I didn't want to take a chance on a peek. My phone was by the assortment of water cups in the bedroom. I could call the cops if I had it. However, I'd have to turn my head away. It stood there motionless, erect, as though someone had caught it in the act. I was also mindful of how long it had been since we had last used the slider and realized it was locked. I imagined him dozing off close to the warm area I had left behind. As I was leaving the room to avoid the snoring, I couldn't help but think of her. I could yell. What happens next, though? Then everyone would just be fucking afraid. I crossed the living room and made my way slowly to the balcony, lowering the paper towel, discovering the specifics of it as I came closer or not. Feminine, long fucking arms, a rounded back, a lifeless trail of fine hair. December is almost here. Where are the clothes? Why my terrace? It appeared pleased to see me, as if this was a welcome surprise. I noticed the rise in my blood pressure and the beads of sweat forming under my arms. A bat or a paper towel in place of a phone, and I just stood there, observing it. Too frightened to check, too scared to see if it was locked. I asked the only question that came to mind as I stood in the living room's deafening, ringing silence. What are you hoping to achieve? It understood my voice even though I couldn't hear it when I talked. Its face began to drop, a sluggish gaze that slid to the left toward my son's chamber. To avoid the snoring, she slept in the kid's bunk bed. A leisurely gaze that lingered past me and back to where my bedroom would be. Stretched out on her side of the bed was the 8-year-old. As I met its eyes, a quiver ran down my lip. Not in this manner. As I say the word, I look into its eyes. No. It inhales deeply and rests against the slider's outside frame. The longer I gaze, the worse it gets. It's an absolute nightmare. It must be an illusion. Its skin hangs from its fucking bones, its chest swells up, and its lungs expand. It's attempting to frighten me. It does not make any sound when it opens its lips to speak, yet I can comprehend what it is attempting to say. The words tingle through my body. I've had the entire evening. I imagine him lying on her side of the bed, and I imagine her in his room. Squeezing a paper towel in my hand served as a reminder that when I grabbed more water, I hadn't leaked. I concur as well. It laughs at the reply and shrugs. It says, "We'll see." It moves and I freak out thinking it's going to try to get inside. I doubt I would be able to stop it. As it settles in, its strange human form twists and its limbs fold strangely to resemble a dog or a horse. It makes fun of me. I attempt to act like this isn't a huge deal while I wait while sitting on the carpet, trying not to show how scared I am. The way it shivers gives the impression that it is chilly outside, pointy bones with thin skin, a face that never stops sagging. Snow is predicted to arrive soon. The main room is icy cold. I have on my boxers. My skin crawls with goosebumps. We fix our gazes on one another. I'm not sure whether there are guidelines. I'm not sure if I can turn my head away or see if it's locked. I don't believe I can halt it. What occurs if they wake up or if I go to sleep? Our peoples. I take a seat, it watches me, and I watch it. The gloomy night is passing. Both the beginning and the end of it are unknown to me. It gets worse the longer I look. It occasionally acts like it's gonna sleep. It's playing tricks on me. The worst element of all, it happens that the mold slips. Whatever is supporting it, whatever the delusion supporting its existence is, similar to a twitch, not that its regular form wasn't awful enough. Whatever is concealed. Sometimes it's a smear of blood and a flash of teeth resembling the scene of a hit and run. Occasionally, it presses up against the glass, flattening its body and giving me a stern look as if to frighten me. Occasionally, it's a female, its mouth gaping open as it screams silent. There may occasionally be none at all. I observe while sitting, too scared to turn away. It will grow impatient, terrified. The hours pass, and in the background, the sun begins to peek above the trees. It lets out a purposeful sigh before the rays even reach its skin. Time is running out. My congrats are spoken with a single nod, and its parting words haunt me as it looks to her in his room and him in my bed. This time you were lucky. It disappears in an instant, returning to the trees with its limbs. Return to whichever hell that was. I'm drenched in perspiration and my body hurts. The only way I'll believe I'm safe is if the sun shines. I check the slider and stand up when I'm ready. It wasn't secured. I check the front door after I've fixed it. I turn the deadbolt knob, but it doesn't make me feel any better. I don't believe my condition will ever get better. The paper towel is in my hand, almost squished under my tight grasp. There's a cold, bare piece of pizza on the counter. The exposed sauce makes me think of the monster. They both ended up in the garbage. I steal into his room to discover her soundly dozing. When I return to mine, he's stretched out on my side. I finish the glass in one sitting, the water on the nightstand getting cold. I carefully lay down next to him, hoping not to wake him, and I place the empty next to the others. I'm hoping that the only sound I hear is his tiny, quiet snores. As I hear the snores, I start to doubt my ability to fall back asleep, or if I ever get any sleep at all. The following narrative. You have obviously not played the game Bone Crusher Park if you find the Ouija board disturbing. In the basement, Natalie discovered the board game. The game was called Bone Crusher Park, and the board was folded in half. She pushed the box off the table gently, brushing the surface with her palm, then opened it and slid it between us. There were images of pine trees, numerous squares with various numbers all around the sides, and a black marble textured glass bubble in the center. I sat down across from her and just looked at the board game's package. On the front was an illustration of a skeleton in the style of the Day of the Dead, complete with ivory makeup on its face and a jumbled-looking body. A fountain and a row of beige brick houses made up the background. She straightened everything up on the coffee table and added, "You have to check this out." She had been in the stuffy basement cellar that I had hardly ever gone into, so once she put the box down, she opened the living room window behind her to let the fresh air pour in. My girlfriend swatted the dust mites off her maroon hoodie, which was coated in them, and then sat down in front of the object. "What made you descend there?" I inquired. I felt I might have dropped or unintentionally kicked the necklace beneath the threshold when I lost it last week. I unable to locate it. "A key is needed for the basement. How did you come upon it?" "It was not closed." They were away from home on a business trip, my parents. I encouraged Natalie to spend the whole time they were away from me since, as a teenager, I knew that these opportunities for alone time were not going to last. The regulations were attached to the underside of the board on a note card that she discovered. The objective of the game is to break more of your opponent's bones by landing in a higher number and planning your moves so that the other player can't stop you from moving forward, she stated. Decide which player will be the park's midnight jogger and which will wield a hammer. The printing on the reverse escaped her notice. Yes, I did. It said if it lands on someone's numerological birth number, those in your immediate vicinity will have to deal with the same issues as the jogger. She put down the card and fixed her gaze on me. "How come?" I said. "I want to play," she said. "You can use the hammer to be the bad guy." "No," I replied. "Why not? It will be enjoyable." "It appears macabre. I would much rather watch a movie. A frozen pizza is there in the refrigerator." She got to her feet and crossed her arms. She was obviously holding back on some explosive words. It was impossible for her to hide the tense body language I had grown accustomed to while witnessing her unhappy. "You're not fond of that concept?" I inquired. She turned her back on me and faced the window, saying, "You never want to do anything spontaneous." Light from the moon peeked through the glass pane. I suppressed a sigh that I knew she would take as a personal jab, a show of defeat, or disdainful. I got up and encircled her with my arms. I gazed at the chess set. I've never been into games like War, Monopoly, or Clue even as a child. I grew up in the video game era, which seemed like a perfect and, dare I say, even better progression of what it meant to have fun. I also understood that relationships sometimes called for giving in. Let's play it, I suggested. I have an open mind. It could be interesting, yet after we're done, let's lock that basement door. I want to keep my parents from finding out that we were nosy in there. I choose to start with the 6-sided die roll. I began on the opposite side of the board and, in accordance with the regulations, could only move a certain number of squares once I rolled a 4. At that point, neither the playing components nor the stimulation level really impressed me. Nevertheless, I was committed to using every effort to guarantee that my small killer managed to overtake the jogging. With her piece, Natalie was able to get farther away from the crazy and make much more progress, thanks to considerably better luck. She said we ought to place a wager. It's simple for you to say that. So far, you're winning. Tides can shift. There is yet a chance. Whoever loses today will purchase Shore concert tickets. This coming weekend, the location she mentioned would host an event for people of all ages. I could see she was pleased to play because of the stakes, even though I was still willing to buy the tickets. Agree, I replied. I rolled once more. The 6 came up on the dice. There was a scream outside the window. I got up and moved to the window. Mr. Bentley, my neighbor, was hobbling across his grass to his mailbox along the main concrete pathway. He appeared to have twisted his right leg in an unusual way. He overstressed and compressed his knee with every stride. His leg made me think of the boyhood doll my father had given me, Stretch Armstrong. I briefly thought about calling 913 and 11, but when I took a closer look at him, I discovered that guy was using his cell phone. He stumbled. His face made contact with the pointed end of the white picket fence separating our houses. I felt sick from all the blood that splattered on the painted wood and the grass. There was an opening that was pinkish white in the laceration on his face. As he lay there in pain, fragments of leaves were picked up by the ripped skin and pus inside the fresh cut. My worries about his security grew. I wanted to help, but I was too embarrassed to risk becoming covered in my neighbor's blood. I answered the phone. Though occasionally to an extreme, we were always encouraged to respect the privacy of our neighbors. You refrained from spreading rumors when you observed a man bringing a stranger whom you knew wasn't his spouse. It was preferable to let their significant other condemn them rather than you if you witnessed a possibly intoxicated neighbor hurting oneself. However, I was far too worried about the incident I witnessed to act as though it never happened. I made a 911 call. The paramedics showed up with sirens and bright lights. After strapping him to a gurney and placing him in the ambulance's back, they drove off. Do you suppose it landed on the birth date of Mr. Bentley? Natalie inquired. It's impossible for you to be serious, I laughed. It was his love of scotch, not the game. Let's continue to play. Natalie's sculpture was approached by the wax figure with a hammer. With the dice, I struck it lucky and was progressively catching up to her component. A part of me thought that I should wait to plan too many obstacles to cause her to slow down. We might have a simpler evening and finish the game sooner if I allowed her to win. We would probably never relive the experience as we drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, but I could search our streaming services for anything interesting to watch. However, my competitive side came out to play. My unattractive trait has always been trying to outdo anyone who has the audacity to think they are better than me at anything. When I wrestled freestyle in middle school, everything that transpired on the mats could only be explained as a demonstration of strength and willpower to defeat the opposition, even though every bout concluded with a handshake that seemed more definitive than anything else in life. I handled anything with rules that could be compared to a competition in this way. My goal in the game was to murder her character and win. When it was my turn, I rolled the dice. Natalie's piece and mine were separated by hardly a millimeter. As if it had sprung to life, the black marble rock in the center swirled beneath the surface. It looked like the scrying goblet I had always imagined a witch would have. It turned a telescopic glimpse into a distinct solar system, darkly milky. I rolled some numbers, and they appeared like a tiny phone screen. Behind the numerals materialized the silhouette of a hammer. I smiled and mimicked the rising and smashing of an unseen hammer on her jogging image, saying bang. She seems unamused. She was furious, and I would not have been shocked if she had ended our relationship at that point. Natalie tumbled through the glass table and off the couch. Her screams pierced the room's calm, and I looked down to see that her wrist had snapped. The bone showed through the epidermis. She showed me the serious injuries to her arm and looked up at me, with her now sharpened face, pleading for assistance. Adrenaline and anxiousness shot through me, so I wasted no time in phoning the paramedics again. During the crisis, I looked down at my fiancée who was lying there crying, while the dispatcher calmly asked me a series of questions. The board game, covered with glass fragments and covered in blood, was sitting right next to her. I had to get rid of it. Everything about this seemed far too logical to be a coincidence. I tucked the dice into my pockets and tried to be helpful while I made the call. To get to the board, I reached above her head. My skin was coated in tiny cuts from the sharp glass fragments in her vital fluid. Enraged, I snatched up the board, folded it in two, and threw it across the room. I informed her that they were en route. I had thought that my words would reassure her, but they had no effect at all because she was still in excruciating pain. I moved to the front door and left it ajar to facilitate the medical team's entry. They carried her out and put her in the back of the ambulance when they got there. The lead emergency worker gave me the option to drive a ride with us to the hospital while he recorded field notes on an iPad. "I'll accompany you guys," I declared. Natalie was screaming, so I sat in the front. "Could you please give her some painkillers?" As we zoomed down a boulevard with immaculate fountains and grass, I asked the driver. "My team will administer something soon, but they're currently putting her arm in a sling." I begged you to do it. I tried not to show how impatient I was. I wanted to shield her from the terror she was experiencing and guide her through every second of her audible discomfort, but I also felt guilty and completely powerless. She let out another scream. I quickly turned to attempt to enter through the glass that was mounted after sitting up. The paramedic reached across my chest with his forearm. "Keep sitting, young man. They are supporting her. Returning there would pose a serious risk to public safety." I said, "Maybe you all should do your work, so I don't have to do it for you." I was instantly filled with regret. In my home, firefighters and emergency medical personnel are considered heroes, and I was aware that losing my cool among them would not improve things. He glanced at me before returning his attention to the road. As I looked down, I noticed an ID. I remarked, "Someone's driver's license is at my feet." "All right," the driver replied. "When we get to the hospital, I'll turn it in at the front desk so they can record it under lost and found." I squinted even more at it, feeling sick to my stomach. Somehow, the dice had slipped out of my pockets and landed on the vehicle plate digits. I pounded the ceiling and roared. Because of me, someone else was going to go through what Natalie was going through. If any of those were her birth numbers, I hoped it would not be her again. I tightened my jaw and awaited a distinct noise. I turned to see the driver's arms shattered. He sank forward as if some unseen deity had crushed his bones from his elbows down to mush. The ambulance skidded off the pavement. The engine tipped on its side, sending smoke and grinding wheels out of it. We ran into a tree. The front windshield shattered as the driver perished instantly. As I crept out, I could make out in the distance a house with lights on. I would get there eventually. It was already too late when the residents called for assistance. If you enjoy this type of content and would like to see more of it, support the channel. Feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications.
Thanks for joining us on Spooky Stories. If you enjoyed the tales of the unknown and the eerie, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell to stay updated with our latest bone-chilling narratives. Until next time, stay curious and keep the chills coming.